Mary Trump joins us to discuss her uncle's state of mind and where she believes he will go from here.
What, in your opinion, I mean, you know your uncle probably better than anybody else, and you have the added advantage of a PhD in psychology, which I believe provides you with a lot of insights into human nature that many of the rest of us may lack. So do you think he's going to be spraying his fire, as it were, at his enemies, or what he views as the people who might have thwarted his efforts? I mean, even within his own circle, like Pat Cipollone, who is not on his side on this thing, apparently. Or is he going to turn on the people who were with him, you know, the Jim Jordans and Marjorie Taylor Greens and whatnot, the people who essentially failed in pulling this thing off?
I think he's going to turn on everybody. I think as we've seen, his circle is getting smaller and smaller by the controversy. So I think there will be very few people left standing.
Are there precedents in his life, in his history, that can inform us about this?
This is one of the fascinating things about this moment. We're speculating, right? I mean, but even at this point, Donald probably doesn't think that anything is going to happen because nothing ever has. He's done terrible things for his entire life, and not once has he been held accountable. So there is no precedent for this. I've actually sat in a deposition with Donald, or rather, sorry, he was deposed in a case of mine a couple of decades ago. I've seen other depositions he sat for, and they also tend to be extraordinarily dull because for a man who has the greatest memory in the history of memories, he forgets everything. He says he doesn't know, he doesn't remember, he's not aware. So I don't expect him to give away anything, honestly.
Right. Well, that's
unfortunately.
Yeah, that's that or taking the fifth are basically the only two ways to avoid any kind of legal liability, I suppose. What do you think about his children? And let's parse this at the individual level. You know, Don Jr. and Eric and Ivanka. How are each of them responding to this, and how is he going to respond to them, particularly the growing evidence that Ivanka wasn't quite with him, or was she, and she's just BSing us all?
Yeah, the first thing we need to understand about those relationships, the relationships between Donald and his three oldest children, are that on the one hand, they're entirely conditional, which is a pretty awful thing to say about a parent's relationship with his children, and they're also entirely transactional. What I've seen with Ivanka is that she came down on the side of not going all in with Donald and his attempt to overturn the government. She is trying to have it both ways. I don't think she can, but she also has been very quiet, and I think Donnie, Donald's oldest son, saw an opening there, and he, on the other hand, has gone all in on supporting Donald, lying for Donald, enabling Donald. And I think right now he is really the only child that Donald believes he can count on. Eric doesn't seem to be that relevant, although I think he is trying to be like Donnie in that regard.
Is Eric as dumb? I realize it's not a clinical term, but is he as dumb as he appears?
Yeah, I would. You know, it's very interesting. I get asked this question a lot, who's the stupidest? And I still think it's Donnie. But there's very little daylight between the two.
What do you think about the possibility that Don Jr. may have a future in politics, whether it's with DeSantis or in some other direction?
I don't think he has any future in politics. The only reason Donald got where he got is because he has, although I hate using this word to describe him, it is true. He has charisma. He has the kind of charisma that doesn't appeal to me or you, but it clearly appeals to tens of millions of people in this country. Donnie doesn't have that. He doesn't have the connections. He doesn't have the 40 years of media propping him up. And, you know, his power is largely reflected power that he gets from Donald. If Donald weren't around, nobody would have any interest in what Donnie says. And I also think that if Donnie wanted to end his relationship with his father, it would be to work with Ron DeSantis.
Oh, yeah, good point. Is this politics? Is politics the most successful grift that Donald Trump has ever engaged in? I mean, you've been observing his grifts for your whole lifetime. You were the victim of one of his early ones.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of putting it, but I think you're right. Just look at how much money has been raised off of the big lie, off of the insurrection, and it's all fraud, or mostly fraud, based on actions he claimed he was going to take if people threw money at him, but then ultimately did not take. So the thing about this particular grift is he has many more marks. You know, there's a couple 100 million of us paying taxes that went directly into his coffer, and it's sort of endless, and it costs him nothing. You know, there are no risks for him, or there weren't any, I should say, when he was in office. And so far as a potential candidate, there haven't been any. What has he raised? $250 million?
Yeah, three-quarters by some estimates.
Well, that's even more terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's, again, with total impunity.
Yeah. We're talking with Dr. Mary Trump, and Mary, we have about a minute and a half here before we hit a hard break I can't control. Could you tell us about your newsletter, your Substack newsletter, The Good in Us? I've subscribed to it since the last time you were on our program, but you know, tell our listeners and viewers about it.
Thanks, Tom. I really appreciate it. I took a little bit of time off because the events were just completely crazy. But what I try to do in The Good in Us is look at current events very honestly and realistically, because I think the worst thing we can do is look away. But remind people that there are more of us than there are of them, and that even though they come at us with negativity and divisiveness, we cannot lose our humanity. We cannot become like them. Otherwise, there's really nothing worth fighting for. So I just am hoping that we all hang on to the good in us, our kindness, our empathy, and all of the things that make being human worthwhile.
I think that's such an important point, you know, that we not lose sight of our shared humanity, even in the middle of what appears to be kind of political battles and things. The website for that, by the way, is marytrump.substack.com. Mary, thanks so much for dropping by. We just have 8 seconds here, but thanks so much for dropping by and for the great work you're doing, and for your most recent book, The Reckoning. Serious work that you're doing. Thank you.
Oh, I can't.